Room 14 was always last on the rotation. Not for any official reason. No memo, no checklist protocol. Just an unspoken rhythm the staff settled into. If there were empty beds elsewhere, patients got those first. Room 14 was used only when absolutely necessary. Technically, it was a 3-bed ward. Linoleum floors, one shared bathroom, metal-framed beds bolted into the floor, and a narrow frosted window that never fully opened. Standard for our older units. Nothing outwardly unusual, but something about the air in there felt heavier. Like the room had too much history, some of it never charted. The first patient who said something was Ernest, a bipolar man with mild psychotic features. Older, soft-spoken. He pointed to the far wall one night and asked why that man never joined group. When I asked who, he gestured plainly. The one in the 4th bed. There were only 3. The staff chalked it up to a misfire in perception, delusional overlay, common enough with his condition. Until Sylvia brought it up too. Different diagnosis, different meds, different year. Same description. He never talks, she said, just sits there. Sometimes he turns his head, but never all the way. And he breathes, real slow, like he's trying to pretend he's not here. That got my attention. She wasn't afraid, just annoyed. She thought he was rude. She described his posture in perfect detail. Back rigid, hands folded at the waist, always facing the corner near the window. Never slept, never blinked. Just sat. After that, the incidents picked up. A manic patient refused to enter the room entirely, stood in the doorway and screamed, "He's already in there!" before staff could coax him into another room. A schizophrenic woman insisted on sleeping in the hallway after being assigned to 14. Said the man moved when no one else was watching, but never when you looked directly at him. Cody, a young man stable on lithium and olanzapine, lasted 2 nights before checking himself out AMA. He said the man in the 4th bed sat on his mattress while he pretended to be asleep, didn't say anything, just breathed, close, shallow, intentional. We started comparing notes, nurses who never shared a shift, different techs. Even one float nurse who hadn't been briefed on the room mentioned it during handoff. Room 14's weird. I kept thinking I'd missed a patient during meds. We reviewed the chart histories. No deaths in the room, no critical incidents, no violent outbursts, just an odd string of early discharges and failed placements. New admits never lasted more than a few nights. We filed a request to reduce it to a 2-bedroom. Denied due to capacity constraints. So instead, we stopped using it unless overflow demanded it. Even then, patients were rotated out quickly. One night, during a particularly packed holiday week, I was forced to sit in room 14. Midnight to 6 a.m., it was uneventful until 3:23 a.m. The patient closest to the door, a woman being monitored for catatonia, suddenly turned her head toward the window and muttered, "He's up again." The other 2 patients were dead asleep. I checked. No elevated vitals. No movement. But the far side of the room, where the imaginary 4th bed would have been, felt colder. Not drafty, not AC cold, just removed. When I turned to scan the space, I caught my own reflection in the window. There was a shape behind me, not a figure, not clearly, just a suggestion, like the outline of someone sitting down, shoulders hunched, facing the corner. I turned. Nothing there, no noise, no shift in air, but the patient at the door-end bed opened her eyes, looked me straight in the face and said, "You saw him, didn't you?" That was the last time I did a shift alone in 14. We asked administration again to close the room. This time they agreed. Said it was outdated anyway, that we'd get upgrades soon. That was 2 years ago. Room 14 is still there, door closed, lights off, cleaned once a week by the same custodian who keeps a Bible tucked in his cart. Staff still avoid walking past it during night rounds. And if you do have to go in for any reason, don't look at the window, don't talk about the extra bed, and never, ever ask why no one sees the man leave. Because if he's sitting there, he's not there for you. He's waiting for whoever comes next. Hello friends, and thank you so much for tuning in. A special shout out to our incredible subscribers. Your support keeps these creepy, fascinating, and sometimes even comforting stories alive. But here's something to think about. Only about 30% of our viewers are subscribed. If you enjoy our content, hitting that subscribe button helps more than you might realize. It only takes a second, but it makes a world of difference. While you're at it, A like and share go a long way in keeping these eerie tales coming. Thank you again for being part of this journey. You're the reason we're here. See you in the next one, if you dare. Mania doesn't always look the way it's portrayed. It's not just speed talking and grandiosity. Sometimes it's quieter, stranger. Sometimes it moves sideways, like a mind skipping frames. The patient was 28, we'll call her Nia, admitted on a 72-hour hold after being found wandering outside a courthouse barefoot, speaking in disjointed phrases about network grids and the lens behind the sky. She was hyperverbal but non-threatening, medically stable, oriented at times, disoriented at others. Her first 2 nights on the unit were unremarkable. She paced a lot, asked to borrow multiple pens, and rearranged the chairs in the group room so they faced west. Staff made note of the behavior, but it wasn't alarming, not yet. The 3rd night changed that. At around 2 a.m., the overnight tech flagged me down, said Nia was on her bed, standing upright, whispering into the ceiling vent. Not shouting, not crying, whispering, repeating the same sentence over and over. "You're not allowed to watch tonight." They said no. I went in gently, careful not to startle her. She didn't acknowledge me at all, didn't break focus, just kept whispering to the vent, like there was someone just on the other side of the grate, someone listening. We documented it, of course, adjusted her meds, set up closer observation. But the next night, it happened again. Same time, same vent, same sentence. That was when we realized it wasn't just a symptom, it was a ritual. Every night between 2 and 2:10 a.m., she'd stand barefoot on the mattress, crane her neck, and whisper into the vent, "You're not allowed to watch tonight." They said no. And every time we tried to intervene, speak to her, guide her down, distract her, she'd ignore us completely. Her eyes never left the vent. When I asked her, during daytime rounds, what she meant, she looked confused. "What vent?" she asked. I pointed upward. She blinked. "I don't think that's a vent," she said softly. "It's not supposed to be open." There was no panic in her tone, just fact. We checked the vent ourselves. It was sealed, screwed in place, nothing irregular. But one of the older nurses, Janet, who'd been there 20 years, told me later that room used to be storage. It was converted to patient use during the last renovation. "There's something off about the airflow in there," she said. "Even when the AC's not running, you feel a draft." Maintenance looked, ducts were clean, nothing inside. But one night, I stayed after shift to observe, just to see for myself. At exactly 2:04 a.m., without warning, Nia sat up. No alarm, no prompting. She stood on the bed, faced the vent, and whispered it again. Only this time there was a pause in her words, like she was listening for something, and then she said something new. "You need to leave. You're not supposed to be here." Her tone was different, not whispering, stern. I asked who she was talking to. She smiled, faintly, not at me, at the vent. "He doesn't like being told no," she whispered, "but they said I had to, until he finds a new watcher." I didn't sleep that night. We continued observation for another week. She never broke pattern, never missed a night. Then, just like that, it stopped. No transition, no taper, just stopped. She was discharged 2 weeks later. Her discharge note was clean, compliant, improved affect, normal sleep. But the next admit we placed in that room, first night, the patient pulled her blanket over her head and asked if we could turn off the man in the ceiling. She wouldn't describe him, just kept saying, "He's back again." Room's still in rotation, still passes inspection. But anytime a new patient gets assigned there, the staff don't talk about the vents, and no one schedules night obs alone. Because some patients scream, some patients hear voices, but the ones who whisper, they're not always talking to themselves. Paranoia, auditory hallucinations, derealization, these are textbook. You see them in psych wards every day. What you don't see often is a patient who's calm, coherent, and convinced you're not you. This one was admitted under a psychiatric hold after an incident at a hardware store. Nothing violent, just deeply unsettling. He'd frozen mid-aisle, stared at a worker for several minutes and told him, "You're wearing someone else's voice." His name was Thomas, late 30s, clean cut, no known psych history, no drugs, no prior admissions, just a sudden, sharp shift in behavior over the course of a week, according to his sister. From day one, Thomas wasn't belligerent. He wasn't catatonic. He cooperated with check-ins, took his meds, participated in group, even helped organize the puzzle table. But he wouldn't speak to the staff directly, only through writing, and he never once looked anyone in the eye. He told the psychiatrist during the initial assessment, flatly, "You're not using your real voice. It's happening to all of you." The psychiatrist pressed. Delusions, thought broadcasting, paranoid ideation. Thomas only said, "Your words are fine, your tone is fine, but it's not the right source. It doesn't match your face." He started documenting the voices in a small composition notebook, kept notes on staff speech, how long we spoke, which words we used, when he thought our voices slipped. One morning I was checking his vitals. Calm environment, nothing unusual. As I wrapped the blood pressure cuff around his arm, he flinched. Not violently, just a jolt. Then, staring straight at my badge, he said in a flat voice, "That wasn't you just now." I asked what he meant. He didn't answer, just scribbled something in his notebook and tucked it under his pillow. Later that day, during group, he sat apart from the others. And when the social worker asked a basic question, something harmless like, "How are you managing your thoughts today?" Thomas covered his ears, eyes wide, and said, "Stop switching voices. That one doesn't belong in this room." This kept happening. Quiet episodes, calm, calculated observations. He wasn't hallucinating in the traditional sense. He described everything clearly, down to the timing and cadence of staff speech. But his fixation was consistent. "You're not the one talking." He refused to let us record him during sessions. Said he didn't want them tracing his voice back. Who they were, we never figured out. But he believed they were replacing the sound of our speech with something foreign. Something that wore our words like a mask. Over the course of 2 weeks, 5 staff members reported strange encounters with him. All the same tone. "That's not your voice. You're not speaking with the right mouth. The sound is too hollow to be human." We ran full neurological tests, EEG, MRI, labs, all clean. His vitals were normal, no seizures, no substance use. The day before discharge, he handed me a sealed envelope, said I wasn't the same channel that I'd been when he was first admitted, but I was close enough now to trust. I read the letter after he left. It wasn't long, just a single line written in tiny block letters. "They speak like echoes, wearing skin." That envelope's still locked in my desk drawer. Because I've heard a lot of unsettling things over the years, but I've never once forgotten the look on his face when he said, "Your words are fine, but they're not coming from you." The unit had just settled down from a rough week. 2 code greens, 1 attempted elopement, and a full census of unstable admits. So when the halls finally went quiet, we didn't question it. We exhaled. Nights like that are rare in acute psych. The patient's name was Derek, late 40s, diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, depressive type. He was admitted after an overdose attempt in his apartment. No note, just a call to his sister minutes before he collapsed. She got him to the ER, and we got him from there. Derek was quiet, almost too quiet. His records showed multiple past admissions, each with the same pattern. Near catatonia on entry, soft-spoken recovery, sudden improvement, early discharge. But staff all agreed, he was the kind of patient you didn't forget. Not because he was aggressive or strange, but because he felt absent. Like a placeholder for someone who hadn't arrived yet. He stayed 11 days. Took his meds, ate his meals. Didn't participate in group, but nodded politely when asked questions. He had this habit of standing in doorways, not stepping out, not stepping in. Just hovering there, like he wasn't sure if he belonged in the room or the hallway. Discharged on a Wednesday, stable, cleared by psych and social work. His sister picked him up around 2:30 p.m. I watched him leave through the double doors. He didn't say goodbye, just turned once and gave this faint little nod. Not at anyone, just at the hallway. Then came Saturday night, 11:43 p.m. I remember it clearly. I was sitting at the nurse's station finishing documentation. A tech walked over with a strange look on his face and said, "You need to see the feed." He pulled up the security footage from the east hallway, and there, clear as day, was Derek, walking, same gait, same slouched posture, Same clothes he was discharged in, gray sweatpants, dark hoodie, hospital socks. Timestamp: Saturday, 11:37 p.m., 3 days after he left. He walked slowly from one end of the corridor to the other, paused outside room 3, the room he'd occupied during his stay, tilted his head toward the door, then kept walking until he reached the end of the hall and didn't turn. He just faded off frame. I immediately called the on-site security officer. He confirmed no one had buzzed through the external doors, no alarms, no sensor triggers, no badge swipes. Staff had been accounted for, patients asleep. We checked again. Derek's face was visible, features aligned, movements matched previous footage from his stay. There was no mistaking him. But the strangest part, none of the hallway motion detectors activated. Nothing registered his presence. We pulled the system logs. Every door on the unit had remained closed from 10 p.m. onward. Not one opened, not even for routine checks. We checked the raw feed from a second camera covering the same hall. He wasn't there. Only the primary camera caught him. The next day, we reviewed discharge notes. His sister had called 2 days earlier to let the hospital know he was doing well, that he'd started taking walks, eating more, talking a little. But when we called back after reviewing the footage, her voice dropped. She told us Derek had died in his sleep that morning. Heart failure, unrelated to his psych condition, declared at 4:12 a.m., nearly 5 hours after the camera showed him in our hallway. We don't show new staff that footage. It's locked in admin now, quietly, unofficially. We still use room 3, but no one charts there after 11 p.m. anymore. And every nurse who's seen that recording swears the same thing. He wasn't visiting. He was finishing something. Because some discharges don't happen on paper. Some happen in hallways, after hours when no one's watching. Some stories don't belong in charts. They don't fit a diagnosis code. They linger in that space between clinical explanation and the part of you that still believes in things we can't write prescriptions for. The patient's name was Devin. Late 20s, nonverbal since childhood. No intellectual disability, just complete silence. He responded to cues, followed commands, smiled at kindness, but never uttered a word. He'd been in and out of care facilities since he was 9. No confirmed trauma, no neurological cause, just a stillness to him, like the world was speaking a language he had no interest in decoding. When he was admitted to our unit, he didn't stand out at first. Quiet, routine, observant in a way that unnerved some of the newer staff. He never caused problems. He kept to himself. He liked sitting near windows, even though he never looked out of them. I was in my 6th year at that hospital when he arrived. Night shift, mostly. You get used to being invisible as a night nurse, moving quietly, keeping things stable until morning rounds. My birthday fell on a Tuesday that year. October. Cold. I didn't tell anyone, not because I was hiding it, just didn't want the attention. I don't wear pins, don't bring cupcakes. I keep my personal life separate from the unit, especially on nights like that one. Short-staffed, overcapacity, and stretched thin. Devin had been with us just under 3 weeks. At 2:11 a.m., while I was restocking linens at the far end of the hall, I heard humming. Low, melodic, soft enough that I thought it might have been the vents. But as I turned the corner near the common room, I froze. Devin was standing there, barefoot, facing the nurse's station, hands at his sides, and then, clear as day, he began to sing. Happy birthday to you. His pitch was perfect, each word deliberate, no slurring, no hesitation. Happy birthday, dear. And then he said my name. Full name, first and last. I hadn't told a soul it was my birthday. It wasn't posted anywhere. Not in the chart, not on the whiteboard, no balloons, no emails, just silence. I didn't know what to say. I didn't move. He finished the song, held eye contact for a moment, his expression unreadable, and then walked quietly back to his room, sat on his bed, pulled the blanket over his knees, and never spoke again. We ran tests. Neurology was baffled. Speech therapists tried to engage him. Nothing. Just the same soft smile and faraway gaze. Eventually, we stopped asking. 6 months later, he was transferred to long-term residential care. The note in his discharge summary mentioned nonverbal behavior consistent with baseline. No one referenced the birthday. But that night never left me. because out of all the patients I've cared for, he was the one who saw me when no one else did. No chart could explain it. No medication could reproduce it. He didn't need a voice until he had something worth saying, and somehow he knew. There's a lot we expect to repeat in psychiatric care: shared fears, thematic delusions, even certain types of hallucinations. The brain clings to patterns, especially when it's unraveling. But this wasn't that. This wasn't a pattern. This was something shared, and none of us could explain how. It started with a man named Robbie, early 30s, schizoaffective, manic type. He came in during a July heat wave, dehydrated, sleep-deprived, and spiraling. On his third night, I found him pacing his room during 2 a.m. rounds. I asked if he was okay. He looked at me, not panicked, not paranoid, just tired. "It keeps happening," he said. "What does?" "The hallway, the red door, the voice." I waited. He elaborated like he'd been rehearsing it. "It's pitch black, except this red door at the very end. I can hear something breathing behind it, and someone whispers, 'Choose.' That's all they say, just choose. But I never know what they mean." I documented it like any other hallucination: lack of sleep, possible side effect of antipsychotics. We see it all the time. But a week later, we admitted someone new, Lucinda, diagnosed with severe depression and dissociative symptoms. No history of psychosis. On her second night, she called the desk at 3:12 a.m. "I had a dream," she said, "and I think it was meant for someone else." I asked her to describe it. There was a long hallway, black, endless, but at the end, there was a red door, and someone whispered behind me, just one word: "Choose." I didn't say anything. I just stood there with the phone in my hand and chills crawling up my neck. Lucinda had never met Robbie. Different wing, different staff, no shared groups. Still, same dream. We ran a quiet staff check just to rule out crosstalk. Maybe one patient overheard the other and internalized it. Happens more than you'd think. But these two had never been within 50 feet of each other. We didn't connect it as a pattern until the third. 6 days later, new admit, James. No psychosis, just generalized anxiety and panic attacks. High functioning, insightful. On his third night, he asked the morning nurse why we'd painted one of the hallway doors red. "What red door?" she asked. James looked confused. Said he saw it in a dream, but it felt too real. Said the hallway smelled like bleach and copper. That someone stood behind him whispering, "Choose," but when he turned around, no one was there. At that point, we couldn't chalk it up to coincidence anymore. We pulled the charts, no overlap, different cities, different ages, different diagnoses. None of them had ever met. All three described the same core imagery: a dark, unlit hallway, a single red door at the far end, whispering, one word: "Choose." No more, no less. Robbie never opened the door in his dream. Lucinda said she reached for the handle but woke up shaking. James said he opened it and found nothing on the other side but the sound of his own voice, screaming. They each described it as recurring, but only while in our facility. And once they left, the dream stopped. We never wrote any of this into the official documentation. We couldn't. There's no clinical code for shared dreaming. We quietly flagged it as an internal anomaly. One of those cases you talk about only in the break room, after hours, behind closed doors. But every time we get a new admit and they mention nightmares, we listen just a little closer. Because if another patient tells me about that hallway, about the red door, about the whisper that says "choose," I don't know if I'll be able to write it off again. Some dreams don't come from inside the mind. Some feel like invitations. And I'm not sure what happens when someone finally chooses. Thank you so much for watching and being part of this growing community. Your support means the world to us, and it's what keeps these creepy, fascinating, and sometimes comforting stories alive. We'd love to hear from you. If you've experienced something eerie, unexplained, or deeply moving, feel free to share your own story in the comments below. You never know, your story might be the next one featured. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share to help keep the chills coming. We couldn't do this without you. See you in the next one.